Well, this morning, another Lord's Day morning for Bible class. We are still talking about lesson number 10. We're talking about practical examples with church activities. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about evangelism. And in essence, when we think about evangelism, that's one of the greatest things that we have opportunity to do, and that is to share God's truth with a lost and dying world. And we've talked about the command that we have to be those that share the gospel of Jesus Christ. We've looked over in Luke chapter 10, also in Matthew 28, which most people are very cognitive of, if you will. We talked about the examples of evangelism. Now, last time we talked about the sending of individuals out to do evangelism. And one of the questions that I always ask, because I think has been not done very much, but talking about where the greatest mission field in our world is. And it's out our own back door. And, we have sent people all over the world. But I noticed just last week, a individual made the statement that they were part of and was doing a Filipino ministry in the United States. I believe that's the way he worded it. Did anybody else see that? Brain went dead. Sal, what's his name? Yeah, Salvador. I'll get it in a minute. He always signs things Sal on the internet, That's what Salvador was saying. It's the ministry from the Philippines now in the United States. And that's kind of unique because we used to take the people from the United States to the Philippines. And I also know of congregations in Africa that are sending missionaries to the United States. Guys, we are in a mission field, and people need to be sent. Now, in letter E down here under that topic, it talks about that they need to be supported by the church where they were. And we're going to go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and go down to verse 7. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and we're going down to verse 7. It says, "For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example, because we did not act in undisciplined manner among you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with labor and hardship we kept working night and day, so that we would not be a burden to you, not because we do not have the right to this, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you, so that you would follow our example." It's a good thing that one can say, two individuals, whatever it is, go to another location and do evangelism, preach the gospel to people. And if you come into a community and you say, "I want to share with you a message," but the first thing you say is, "I want your food. I want your money. I want your things." Now, how many people are going to really listen? Not very many. You're not going to get a very good audience. But if someone, say for instance, a congregation or an individual, can support a couple of people and go to a location and start sharing the gospel, They're paying their own way. They're doing their own thing. The thing about it is, and we've read this previous, sometimes we have to build tents like Paul did to do this kind of work. And sometimes that's a good thing because it gets a person with the population that's there. But also they need support to do the work. And, we sit back and we think that, well, we're going to send this one guy over here to this location to do all this work. Well, one person, it's hard to do that kind of a thing, just one individual. How many did Jesus send out in the 70? How many did he send out in the 70 together? 2 by 2. Yeah. Sent out 2 by 2. And I've heard this asked, when we look at a mission, say overseas or even in the United States, why don't we just send one family? Why don't we send 2 families? I guarantee you Satan is sending multiples of families to teach apostasy, to teach false doctrine. So here it notes that these individuals have to have their needs met. In essence, is what it talks about here. Let's jump down to 1 Corinthians chapter 9 quickly. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We're going to start there at verse 3. First Corinthians 9, verse 3. It says, "My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have a right to eat and drink? Do we not have a right to take along a believing wife, even as the rest of the apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Or do only Barnabas and I have the right to refrain from working? Who at any time as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat the fruit of it? Or who tends a flock and does not use the milk of the flock? I am speaking these things according to the human judgment I am. Or does not the law also say these things? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle the ox while he is treading. God is not concerned about oxen, is he? Or is he speaking altogether for our sake? Yes, for our sake it is written, because the plowman ought to plow in hope, and the thresher to thresh in hope of sharing the crops. If we sow spiritual things in you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share the right over you, do we not more? Nevertheless, we do not use this right, but we endure all things, so that we may cause no hindrance to the gospel." So again, noting here, supporting, taking care of those that are out there spreading the gospel, teaching the truth. I don't know about your house, but my family has always had this real serious problem. They like to eat. They like to eat. I don't know why, but they do. And if an individual is working at sharing the gospel, teaching others to teach others, to do all of those things, they need to be taken care of. We get down to verse 14. Here in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, it says, "So also the Lord directed those who proclaim the gospel to get their living from the gospel. But I have used none of these things, and I am not writing these things so that it will be done so in my case, for it would be better for men to die than to have made man make my boast an empty one. For if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for I am under compulsion, for woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this voluntarily, I have a reward. But if against my will, I have a stewardship entrusted to me. What then is my reward? That when I preach the gospel, I may offer the gospel without charge, so that not to make full use of the rights of the gospel. So we have the opportunity to do these things, but also uh, we need to understand that people that are working at this effort, they need to have the support that they need. I was watching some videos from World Video Bible School over this week mostly. If y'all not familiar with World Video Bible School, you can get it on YouTube and Facebook. And I mentioned Wednesday night some videos that I sent everybody. I would encourage you to go over and look that up. It's just WVBS, and you can find it .org. And here's the thing: there's all kinds of videos and stuff that are on there. And the fellow that kind of runs that was on one of these videos, and he was mentioning. He said, if God comes to us and says, "Did you take the gospel to the world?" What are we going to say? And he made mention that because of technology, because of how easy it is to make videos today and get that out into the world, many places are taking the gospel, the scriptures, the truth to the world. Guess who else is doing that we know of? Everybody raise your hand here. Yeah, it's going out there. And people are all over the world are having that opportunity because God gave us the method to do it, and we're doing it. And that's a good thing. But there again, there has to be an investment in those kind of programs, those kinds of opportunities. Let's look at F in our outline here. It says supported by one church to preach to another. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and drop down to verse 7. First Corinthians 11:7. Or did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that you might be exalted? Because I preached the gospel of God to you without charge? I robbed other churches by taking wages from them to serve you. And when I was present with you, I was in need. I was not a burden to anyone. For when the brethren came from Macedonia, they fully supplied my needs. And in everything, I kept myself from being a burden to you and will continue to do so. Sometimes we need assistance. And I'm going to suggest, and if you look across our nation, there are many congregations out there that need a little infusion. Maybe they need some assistance in keeping the doors open and having someone that can come in and teach them to teach others. And that's a key factor over in Timothy, is we're commanded to teach others how to fulfill what we know to do, and as a minister, as a preacher. And we look at our own, like right here in our own area, we need to work on that. We need to have that happen. And we need to understand that one individual can't do it all. If a group does it, that's great. But that does not negate the blessing of larger, maybe more, what's the word I want to look for? Blessed congregations could help in those efforts. Even, acquiring of needed things to do, evangelism, to teach. And rather than sitting at their large, blessed congregations thinking about changing the chandelier out in the foyer, maybe they need to think about souls. And that gets real, it gets in my heart. I know of very blessed congregations that they're more concerned about the carpet, the color of the carpet, than they are about souls. When you think about souls, we, from our congregation, we support that couple over in Africa, and they've done some great work, and that's a blessing. And Salvador, we help Salvador a little bit, those kind of things. Now Salvador's come over here to help us. He'll probably see this and said, "Oh yeah, I'm over here doing this for you." Yeah, yeah, you got to know Salvador. So now Salvador will do anything for Brahms ice cream. If Salvador, if you are watching this, you know I'm telling the truth. Anyway, we can help other congregations do this. Now, that does not mean that we can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Overlords of that congregation. And it doesn't mean that. It means that we can assist them in their work. And we can look at 1 Corinthians 9:18 says, "What then is my reward? When I preach the gospel, I may offer the gospel without charge." We read that a moment ago. So underlying principles here. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We read this just a moment ago. Also, and it notes that the ox should not be muzzled. So we can support these good works. But also in supporting a good work, we need to know what's going on at these locations. Not too long ago, there was a work going on overseas that several congregations was supporting. And there wasn't very much coming back from the field, what we'd say call from the mission field, about what was going on. So one congregation sent some men over to check this out. Well, they got over there, and the money was coming in, and what was being taught was Protestantism, was not Christianity, and there wasn't much else going on, but the money was just kind of filtering out. So we need to know what's going on anytime that we support something along that way. One of the things that I did whenever brethren supported Linda and I in school, I would send a report to everyone of what we were doing, what we'd been doing, what classes we were taking in school. Gave them the whole what do you call that news little newspaper thing. What do you call that? Huh? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, this was back that you had to put it in the snail mail. So you had to type it up, and send it all out. And it's kind of like we get from Malawi. Wasn't quite that fancy, I promise, because that was back in the early 90s. But we let people know what was going on. And that's what you need to do. Just doing and nobody knows what's going on, it can get kind of like it can kind of get over bloated, and there's a whole lot of funding there that's not being utilized correctly. Does that make sense? Y'all ever hear of anything like that over the last week? Another entity that does that? Enough said about that. Yeah, but I've known of entities that connected with the church that they were always out begging for money, and they had so much money they didn't know what to do with what they had. And seriously, that's a reality. Here's the thing. We need to utilize what God blesses us with to share the gospel. In number 5 under this, the Old Testament pattern, this is Deuteronomy chapter 14. Deuteronomy chapter 14 going down to verse 27. Deuteronomy 14:27. Let's just pop over there right quick. Deuteronomy 14:27. It says, also you shall not neglect the Levite who is in your town, for he has no portion or inheritance among you. You know, one of the things about the Levites, they were not given any land. Their family was not given any of the land when it was all divided up. They were to be what? Who were the Levites? Who were the Levites?
They were those that took care of the temple.
They took care of the temple. They were
And then the line of
Aaron, the priest. Yeah. That's what their job was. And it was in the commandment of God that they receive enough support to do that work. And it notes here that the Levite who is in your town, he has no portion or inheritance among you, and he had nothing. Now, they were given plots of land to farm, or maybe we would call garden. They were giving plots of land to have cattle and stuff like that on, sheep, goats, all those kind of things. No pigs. No pigs. But this Levite who was there, you know, he needed some support. Verse 28 says, at the end of every 3rd year, you shall bring out all the tithes of your produce in that year and shall deposit it in your own town. So all the tithes of their product, they were to bring it out and deposit it in their own town. Now, the word tithe means a tenth. If you go back and you look at Levitical law, God required a tenth, like it's talking about here. But that was just to support these individuals. There was an extra when it come to giving of sacrifices. You had to own your own sacrifice. Sometimes, as we know, they bought their sacrifice. That was a big deal that Jesus dealt with. And you were to bring those grain offerings, whatever it might be. And then you gave it to the priest to sacrifice. Sometimes you got a portion of that back, that animal. Sometimes you didn't. If it was a burnt offering, you didn't get any of it back. Part of the time, you would get part of it back, and the priest received the rest. So there was that continual support of these individuals. Let's look at verse 29. Back to the tithe. There is no commandment to tithe under the new covenant. It's to give as we have prospered, as our heart desires. So somebody comes along and says, you got to send a tenth to me. No, Bible doesn't teach that under the New Testament. Had to throw that one in. Verse 29. The Levite, because he had no portion or inheritance among you, and an alien, the orphan and widow who are in your town shall come and eat and be satisfied, in order that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. So this tenth that they're bringing in was for the Levite. What else? The widow and the orphan. You know, the New Testament tells us that we need to take care of the widows and the orphans. And it gives some parameters in New Testament scripture about the widows. But we utilize the blessings that God has given us for his glory. And that does not mean that we give everything that we have. You know, we think about the widow's mite. She gave everything. But we need to give everything to God because it belongs to God. But we also have to have enough for our own sustenance. Does that make sense? And we need to make sure that we do that. Now, back to what we're talking about and all of this about evangelism. Every Christian has an obligation to share the gospel with others. We all have an obligation, every one of us. Because when it talks about over in Matthew 28, when it says, go ye, that means all y'all. All y'all do this. And, you know, we've kind of got out of the mode of sharing the gospel with everybody as Christians. We have been beaten down by Protestants and others, people who follow Satan, has beaten us down so bad we just don't want to talk about it to anybody, because we might hurt their feelings, or we might make them angry, or they might not be my friend anymore. I've had more than one Christian tell me that they couldn't share the gospel with their friends because they might not be their friend anymore. Think about that just a minute. If I was out in the world, lost, destined to an eternity in hell, and you were a Christian, and you were my friend, and you wouldn't tell me about Jesus, what kind of friend would you be? What do y'all think? Would you be that real good friend that you want? Now, if I was walking out across there and I was about to fall off the cliff and you were sitting there as my friend, look, this okay. Same difference. You're not a very good friend if you won't share the gospel of Jesus Christ with others. So we need to be those who are sharing the gospel. It takes support to do so. I mean, we have to understand that everything we do has an investment. Now, that's not just a monetary investment. It can also be an investment in your time, energy, all of those things. So let's reach out to a lost and dying world when opportunity arises. We'll talk about caring for the needy next Lord's Day morning.